So, David, would you like to give us your comments first?
Sure. From here. Thank
Take
you, Ray.
on this.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your invitation, and thank you, Charlie Wu, who's been a pillar in our community. I know you've already recognized him, but I really want to recognize the actual person who paved the way for me, Councilmember Mike Wu, who, if you thought my election was hard, it was harder. And I now have the fortunate opportunity to represent him. But what you did here is great, and I'm shocked that we don't see a lot more consultants or political animal types here, because this is the information that often is lacking. For various reasons, as you mentioned, I'm sure earlier, is whenever they do polls, Asian Americans are usually undersampled or not even sampled at all because it's just so difficult. Because when you say Asian Americans, who are you talking about? Chinese American, Japanese American, Korean American, and because a lot of them are foreign born, they don't have the language capabilities, so it's really difficult to try to figure out what they're leaning towards. But this proves a lot of the assumptions that we have, that we just talk about amongst ourselves. Oh, and you know what? Our future Senator Mike Ng is in the. I forgot to recognize. He's hiding right behind the podium.
I know.
So no, it goes and proves a lot of the thoughts that we already knew about, but you actually quantified it. And I don't know if you wanted me to kind of add some thoughts on each one of them, or
whatever you want to take 3 minutes on, whatever you want to do, and then
okay. I'll just do one that I noticed. You know, especially for religion. I mean, it's clear. I mean, it's immigration patterns. My mother wasn't religious. I think she attended maybe 1 or 2 services while she lived in Korea. But when she came here and immigrated, the churches became not a center for religious affairs per se, but a community center.
Wow.
A place for people to congregate, people to just speak our language. So the churches became the focal points, and that's why I think you can see it in, especially for Japanese, it's a little bit lower because now they're 4th, 5th generation versus the newer immigrants who are, especially for Koreans, who are very using the church centers, the religious centers as a center of congregation. One thing that I wanted to kind of maybe disagree and maybe drill down more is voting by age and by nativity. I think you said maybe foreign-born, usually foreign-born doesn't vote. But I think especially in the Asian American culture, in the community, it's not that they don't vote, they just don't know how to vote. They're not told who to vote for. So, and many times whenever I volunteered on campaigns and we did phone banking in language, we used to get skyrocketing numbers of yeses. And many of the campaigns thought, oh, how is this possible? It's because no one ever told them to vote. So they just don't know. And I remember when my grandmother was still alive, she lived in a senior citizen apartment. I had to go every election, fill out her book, and she used to tell all her friends how to vote. And that was about 180 votes. Yeah, wow. It was one of the largest in San Pedro. So that's the way, because they all trust. And that's why they want their kids to come and read their mail, read all these things, and then tell them how to vote. So, and it shows that even in my election, as well as John Choi's election, and this goes towards your slide with media, Asian media. In John Choi's election, not to say that, who ran for Los Angeles City Council prior to me, not to say that his campaign didn't do aggressive outreach in the Asian American, particularly Korean American community, but the press did a tremendous amount. And voter turnout in that election, which was mayoral election, Garcetti versus Gruhl, was about 22%. But the Korean American turnout in his election was about 43%.
Wow.
And majority were all seniors who are probably foreign born. Right. And in my election, we did an aggressive turnout. Again, it definitely helped me out in the primaries, but in the generals, it didn't really matter as much, but it still was a key point. The election turnout in my election was 16%. For Asian Americans, Korean Americans, it was about in the 40s again. So that shows that when you aggressively go after the Asian American community and you educate them on, you just don't tell them how to vote. Well, many of them will just say, okay, I'll do whatever you want me to do because someone actually called them in language, but it's also the fact that you explain to them that this person's good for our community, has done work for our community. So I think in this particular case, the foreign-born seniors are very active. And that one other question about and I'll just end with this, talk with friends, how it was a lower number for seniors. Actually, I think the question you want to ask is, if you look at especially foreign-born, they are very, very political, especially the Asian Americans who immigrated here because of immigration patterns and the fact of their educational levels. But if you ask them, are you engaged in politics here, it might be a lower number. But if you ask them about politics in their home country, they know everything. So they are very political. They just feel that they just don't get enough information locally to get more engaged. So maybe you could ask those two questions.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
We want to get as much out of you as you can before you leave at 9:40, so I'm going to do a follow-up question. You said that the religious institutions provide a community environment and a welcoming environment for immigrants. To what extent does it provide a politicizing environment? And now I know that there's other communities in which the religious institutions are explicitly in the business of making sure that people are hearing about the election and turning out to vote. Is there a taboo about that, or is it done, or how does that play out?
Yes, there is a taboo. Well, I don't want to speak for all Asian American communities, but at least for the Korean American community that I know of, and it just doesn't stay with the religious organizations, but it's also the nonprofits. There is a huge, like in Korea, South Korea, when they say nonprofit, they mean nonprofit. When we say nonprofit here, you get government funding, and as long as you do philanthropic work. But in South Korea, nonprofit means non-governmental organization, NGO. You have no relationships with the government. Because there's even though it's a strong democracy, it's a fairly new democracy, and they don't trust government. Remember, there's a lot of dictatorships in South Korea as well. So when they say nonprofit NGO, they differentiate between the nonprofits that get government assistance and the nonprofits who are really grassroots and if you take a penny from government, they don't trust you. So, and even in churches, it's a taboo where you don't talk about politics. You do not get involved, and people are scared. Even the papers, the media, the Asian media papers are too scared to endorse. Fear of offending, a fear of being marginalized, fear of backing the wrong person, where then they'll get repercussion or retribution. And it's partially more of an immigrant mentality of back in the old country, thinking if you go against, because it was only maybe 15 or 2 decades ago in South Korea, if you badmouth the president, you could go to jail, even though it's a democracy. So that's kind of ingrained in in my parents' generation, not to speak up.
So last question, and then I'm going to ask the other panelists to speak. If one of your council colleagues had a district with a large Asian American population and asked, how should I reach these older foreign-born voters, and I am not myself Asian American, what would you advise that person to do?
Oh, it's very easy. I think the Asian American community, we've progressed tremendously, and I think our voice is being heard. But just coming out, I would say Asian press. They would love to do featured articles. Just coming out in the community, people would just line up because they're just so excited because to see elected officials because our community isn't as been privy to that. So it's very easy. I mean, it's not a matter of how do I do it, it's just do you have time?